I'm out on Trail 4 at Carolina Adventure World. Dusk has set in, and the sun is getting low on the horizon, which makes it even darker in the woods. I have 3 people of various skill levels on machines of varying mechanical states following me through the park, assuming I know where I'm going. But there are several problems. Problem 1, I haven't been to Carolina Adventure World in 6 years. Problem 2, it's getting dark and one of the guys does not have headlights. Problem 3, by far the worst, that compounds all the others, is while we were waiting for 2 of the group to catch up, I turned my Can-Am Renegade 500 off and now it won't start again. How did we get in such a position? The 4 of us had this trip planned since January to celebrate a college graduation for Al, my girlfriend's son. He survived the engineering program at UNC Charlotte. Well done, Al. We were going to the Hatfield and McCoy trails to celebrate, and we were all excited. It was almost painful waiting 6 months for this trip and managing not to ride a single time as a group in between, due to various reasons. Weather, college, work, quads that weren't fixed, you name it. I checked the weather for West Virginia about a week out. Rain every day. Not good. I checked here at home in Boone. Same. Not good. Then I see a hurricane is coming. Not good at all. I searched a 3-hour radius from Boone, Tennessee to Kentucky, to South Carolina, and finally found decent weather at Carolina Adventure World in Winnsboro, South Carolina. Without telling anyone in the group, I canceled the West Virginia trip and snagged the last cabin available at CAW. I knew it would probably be muddy, but they don't close rain or shine, and there aren't many hills, so how bad could it be? I tell Al to come up the night before so he can help me load up. That day he sends me a picture of his truck tire with a huge piece of metal in it, and he can't access his spare. He can't make it up and we'll need to get him on the way down the next day. No problem, we go through Charlotte anyway. I tell my buddy Gary, be at the house by 10 a.m. and we'll hit the road by 10:30. Thankfully he is excited and gets to the house at 9 a.m. It was pouring rain the night before, so I wasn't able to load anything up and could use the help. We hook up the trailer and load up 2 ATVs, 1 motorcycle, riding gear, and whatever else we needed for 3 days and nights. We scoop up Al on the way down and his bike, and spirits are high. We finally arrive at Carolina Adventure World around 3:30 p.m. to a hot but dry day. We get everything unloaded, our cabin set up, and take a look around. We're also waiting on our 4th, Sean, who's not famous for getting to places early. Someone checks on his status and he says he's on his way. We walk outside to look around and the sky is getting darker, way darker, and windy. Within a few minutes we get gale force winds and torrential rains for a good hour. We finally get cabin fever and decide to drive around the grounds in my Ford Raptor, a good vehicle for exploring. We even squeezed in a jump or 2. We come back to the cabin and it's around 7 p.m. Still no Sean. I'm getting a little nervous since the gate closes at 8 p.m. Sean has a 2-hour drive, so one would think he could make it if he left at 3 p.m., but he didn't. He finally arrives at 7:30 p.m. with 30 minutes to spare, and it stopped raining. With the crew together, I suggest a quick evening ride. We'd paid for riding passes for that day, and I wanted to get some of my money's worth. We head out on the main trail from the parking lot, which I learned later is Trail 17. Now, I could have looked at the maps we had, 4 of them, but what fun is that? We started to turn off on a smaller trail, but it opened up with a huge mud hole and I had enough sense to turn around. I didn't want anyone getting stuck in mud in the dark. Great idea, right? We crossed the bridge from 17, which I remember from my last time there. I didn't recall having any navigation issues then, so we headed on into the trail system. I see a trail the width of a road labeled Trail 4 and decide to try it out. It was wide and seemed like another main trail, so it should be easy like 17, right? The further we go in, the muddier it gets. We come across a stream crossing and I consider turning us around. I look back and everyone is eager and pointing for me to go on, so I do. We go through another 15 minutes of trail and it is fun. It's wide enough to go fast and there are several places to jump. But then we start climbing hills. Not that steep or long, but super muddy due to the 5 days of rain and recent 60-minute monsoon, with ruts. Sean is on a Suzuki Z400 and is having a tricky time. He has decent rear traction somehow, but the quad won't track straight. It also doesn't like to idle, so it keeps dying on him, on the hills. Al is on his Honda CRF 250X and is riding like a champ. Gary's on my Polaris Trailblazer 250, doing fine and staying behind Sean. When I have people riding behind me, I usually look back to check every few minutes or so to make sure everyone is okay. I look back at one point and it's only Al. No sign of Sean or Gary. We stop and wait about 5 minutes and still nothing. I turn off the Can-Am so I can hear their motors. Turns out that was a mistake. I've had quite the battery struggle with the Can-Am, which is otherwise a great quad. I have other stories to tell about those struggles, but I'll leave that out of this one. Other than to say this is not the first time I've had issues. But I just spent about 3 hours and over $100 fixing the rear battery tray before this ride, which had never been right since I'd owned it. And bungee cords will only get you so far. Before this trip, I ordered all of the pieces for the weird battery assembly design. A metal frame with a tab, a triangle hook with a top bolt, brace at the top that holds the battery and is held in place by the triangle hook and tab, rubber battery tray, and even put in another negative battery cable. I used one from eBay because I'm cheap, and what could go wrong with buying used battery cables? Design is great for holding the battery in place during aggressive riding, but it's an absolute pain to get to for maintenance or work, especially now that I've put all the stock pieces back in. I know immediately it's a connection issue. The quad has EFI and a fuel pump, and when I hear that clicking sound, I know it can't get enough juice to turn over and you don't hear the fuel pump turn on. I try moving the positive battery cable around, thinking I'd at least get it to make enough of a connection to start. And when I get back to the camp, I'd fix it. Doesn't matter, I can't get it to connect. The friends who were behind us have caught up and are asking what is wrong. I had enough sense to pack some tools and I break out the pliers to try to remove the assembly so I can get a better look at the battery. But I can't get the pliers to bite because the top brace has flanges that are in the way. Stupid. I really need an 8mm close-ended wrench, which I have back at the cabin. I try the pliers for about 10 minutes with no luck, and it's getting darker and darker. The guys ask if they can help. I let them try on the bolt for another 10 minutes. Now it's completely dark, and we are halfway in the woods on a trail I don't know in a 1,200-acre park. Where I trained for 4 days straight due to a hurricane. I'm normally very level-headed and a good problem solver, but now I can feel just a little bit of panic start to set in. The park is closed, so I can't call them to get towed out. I have the heaviest quad with 4-wheel drive, so I was going to be the one to tow others out, not be the one to break down. And I'm not sure if anyone else even has working headlights. More dread and panic set in. Sean starts trying to figure out how to get the battery out so we can take a look at it. I told him I can't get the bolt off. Sean has super strength, so he manages to work the battery out of the tray with the assembly still in place. We check the connections and they are a little loose at the battery, at the positive and negative terminals. But after tightening, it still won't turn over. Just the clicking. Now I'm in full give-up mode and thinking maybe Gary could tow me out with the Polaris. Worst case, I'll walk beside my four-wheeler. I start to take the tow rope off the Can-Am. Sean is still working on the battery and gets out and hits the start button. It starts. It sounds like crap, is missing, backfiring flames, and won't run at idle because it still isn't getting quite enough juice from the battery. But it's running. I hop on without even putting the tools back into the battery compartment and storage area or even putting my helmet back on. It's pitch black and I want off this trail. I see Al and Sean fire up their machines and turn on their headlights. Gary asks me how to turn on his headlight and I have to tell him his lights don't work. We start off at a snail's pace. I feel something drop and realize it was my goggles, but I'm not stopping. I put my helmet on and get a hold of the tools and keep going. Gary is behind me and basically managing by following my tail lights and trying not to die. He has no lights at all, but we are moving. We come to a large clearing at the top of a hill. At the clearing, I can't see any lights surrounding us. I don't see tents, RVs, fires, anything. I'm praying the trail is clearly defined and we won't get turned around onto another worse trail or just randomly into the woods. We are only going about 5 to 10 miles an hour so Gary can see. It takes us forever to circle the clearing as the trail snakes around. In the dark, everything is looking very much the same. For a moment, I'm wondering if we were just doing laps around the clearing. But then I see we enter the forest again with a sign pointing to the right for Trail 4. Turns out if we had stayed straight instead of turning right to go back into the forest, I would have seen a nice sign that said parking lot straight ahead. At that point, we would have been back on a main road and cruising to the parking lot in maybe 10 minutes. But I didn't see it. I stay on Trail 4, and it takes us at least a half hour or more before I see another sign for the parking lot. I can't say I've ever had that level of low and high on a trail before. I'm incredibly disappointed in myself for leading us out on a trail that late and then adding to it by breaking down. But I see the sign and I know we made it, I thought. We're driving for what seemed like forever on SR18, and I'm still not seeing any lights ahead. Also, my low beams have one bulb out, but it's so dark I'm afraid to try and switch on the high beams for fear of hitting the kill switch. After about 5 minutes on SR18, I see a sign for the parking lot in the other direction. I make everyone U-turn, thinking they may just stab me and leave me behind. We circle back and see the connector for 17. I finally recognize where we are and know that we're going to make it out, for real this time. We even come across several other riders cruising around. We get back to the cabin and the trip from hell is over. It's 10 p.m. We were out there for 2 hours. I check the trail map and see that Trail 4 is one of the longest trails in the park. Good job, Brian. But it's over. We can shower up, eat, and get ready for tomorrow. Then Gary tells us he actually wrecked in the parking lot before we even got started. He fell off the Polaris trying to do a slow-speed donut, and he shows us how his back is scratched up. Last year on a trip, Gary rolled the Can-Am, broke a rib, and had to go home 2 days early. He says he doesn't think he broke a rib this time, he just sort of fell off the quad, but he scratched his back pretty good. He said he can make it through the weekend, and worst case he'll just hang out at the cabin. However, the next day he calls his wife to come get him, and it turns out he broke a rib again. I worked on my Can-Am for about 2 hours that morning, including a trip to an auto parts store for new battery wires and connectors. After replacing the positive wire, it still didn't fix the issue, and the Can-Am still won't start. I finally figured out it's the negative wire, the one I replaced already. The wire had a short just at the connector for the battery terminal. Dumb design. I cut it and added in new wire and a new connector. Then I proceed to break the new connector twice, trying to get the battery and assembly back in place. Did I mention this is a stupid design? I'm out of connectors, but managed to use one of the broken connectors and lots of electrical tape to get everything back in place and working. I never felt such joy from an ATV starting. We worked for another 2 hours on Sean's quad and then finally hit the trail in the daylight. At first I have PTSD and don't want to hit any bump for fear of things coming loose, but eventually I opened things back up. We ended up having a great time and rode around 90 miles by the time we parked Sunday evening. Not bad for a trip with such a rough start. If you like these types of trail stories, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. Thanks for watching.